St. John's Gospel, chapter 18, the arrest and examination of Jesus Christ, verses 1 to 27. After Jesus had prayed this prayer, he left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. There was an olive grove there that he entered with his disciples. This spot was well known to Judas, who betrayed him, because Jesus often used to go there with his disciples. So Judas, together with a detachment of soldiers and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there, carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, who knew what was about to happen, stepped forward and says to them, "Who are you looking for?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "Ego eimi," Jesus answered. Now Judas, the traitor, was standing there with them. When Jesus uttered the words, "I am," they all drew back and fell to the ground. Jesus asked them once again, "Who are you looking for?" And once more they replied, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said, "I've already told you that's me. So if it's me you're looking for, let these men go." He said this so that what he predicted might come to pass. "Of those who you gave me, I have not lost a single soul." And then Simon Peter, who happened to have a knife, drew it and took a swipe at the high priest's servant, called Malchus, and cut off his right ear. Jesus said to Peter, "Put your knife back in its sheath. Am I not to drink the cup that the Father has given me?" Then the detachment of soldiers with their captain and the Jewish officials arrested and bound Jesus. First they brought him to Annas, the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. It was the same Caiaphas who had advised the Jewish leaders that it was better for one individual should die instead of the whole population. Now Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus, and because that other disciple was known to the high priest, he was able to go with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. But Peter had to wait outside at the door. The other disciple, who was known to the high priest, then came out and spoke to the girl at the door and brought Peter in. She says to Peter, "Don't tell me you're one of that man's followers, aren't you?" "Certainly not," he replied. It was cold, and the servants and officials had made a charcoal fire and were standing around warming themselves. Peter also joined them to keep himself warm. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his followers and about his teaching. Jesus responded, "I've spoken publicly. I've always taught in the synagogue and in the temple where all the Jews congregate. I've said nothing in secret. Why do you question me? Go and question those who heard what I said. They know perfectly well what I taught." At this, one of the officers standing nearby slapped him. "Is that the way to answer the high priest?" "If I've said anything wrong," replied Jesus, "then point it out to me. But if not, why do you hit me?" Annas then sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was standing warming himself. They asked him, "Surely you're not one of his followers, are you?" "No," said Peter, "of course not." one of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, confronted him. "Hang on, didn't I see you in the garden with him?" Again Peter denied it, and at that instant a rooster began to crow. The trial of Jesus Christ, verses 28 to 40. They then take Jesus from Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was the crack of dawn, but they did not enter the headquarters to avoid becoming defiled because they wanted to eat the Passover meal. So Pilate came out to listen to them and said, "What charge are you bringing against this man?" They replied, "If this man wasn't doing something wrong, we wouldn't have handed him over to you." "Well, take him away yourselves," said Pilate, "and judge him by your own law." "Ah," the Jews replied, "it isn't lawful for us to put anyone to death." This fulfilled what Jesus had predicted about the kind of death he would die. Then Pilate went back again to his headquarters and summoned Jesus and said to him, "Tell me, are you the king of the Jews?" "Is this something you've worked out for yourself?" asked Jesus, "or did others tell you this?" Pilate replied, "I'm not a Jew, am I? It's your own people and the chief priests who handed you over to me. Just tell me, what have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom isn't a worldly one. If it were, my subjects would be fighting to stop the Jewish authorities arresting me. No, my kingdom isn't from here." "Oh, so you are a king then, are you?" Pilate inquired. "These are your words," said Jesus. "I was born and came into the world for this reason, to testify to the truth. Everyone who seeks the truth listens to me." "Really?" says Pilate. "Tell me, what is truth?" After he said this, he went out again to the Jews. "I can find no evidence to support the charge you make against him," he said. "Now, you have a custom that at Passover I should release someone. Who shall it be? The king of the Jews?" "No, no," they cried. "Not this man. We want Barabbas." Barabbas was a terrorist. And that concludes my reading of chapter 18. You can obtain a copy of the whole work from Matador. It's also obtainable on Amazon or on Kindle. All profits are going to Christian charities.